my airplane. The second file, the one on the bottom.
Second file from the bottom?
No, that one. Bottom one. Display. Go to play slideshow. Here we go. All right. So thank you very much. If I get boring or I say something that if I take too long, just tell me to shut up.
No worries.
Thank you. This is my pointer, right?
Yeah,
And there we go. And yeah, and thanks for the birthday wishes. Now, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I can tell you this much. The first number is twice the second number, which means I could be 63. Anyhow, I bought this airplane. This is my third Aerostar. I bought this one from Don Smith. I think I paid $60,000 for the airplane. Might have been 55. 60,000 is the number that strikes me. It was, I refused to fly it, but Don said he'll put an annual on it and fly it up to Canada. Okay, he didn't put an annual on it, but anyway, he ferried it to Canada, and I got to give him an A+ for bravery. But actually, the airplane was in pretty good shape. I was surprised at how good condition. The only corrosion we found on it was under one of the wing boots, but that was it. I mean, everything else was in first-class condition. So my plan was to put it into the shop and upgrade it with the Marsh Brothers innovations that we've been working on and had been developing for the Bonanza and Baron. So it went to the shop, and it was in the shop for 2 years. When it came out, I had spent $800,000 on this airplane. And Bill Lawson had once said, you know, the Aerostar is $1 million airplane. If you really want to get serious about getting the best out of the airplane, be prepared to spend that much money on it. And I think there's a basis for that. So there we go. We got the engines out. They built a kind of a pedestal for underneath so they could jack the airplane up and sit it on it. How do I advance the slide? This way, I guess. Okay, so first thing we did, of course, we're in the bearing and seal business. We make bearings that are up to 15 feet in diameter, mostly for the marine and the hydroturbine worlds, but this was the smallest bearings we ever made. We're pulling out the trunnion bearings for the main landing gear with this puller in this slide. And the idea was to get rid of all the grease. So there is 2013, we put the AeroTough, which is a polymer we make, our parent company makes the polymer. Nobody else in the world makes it. We actually compound it and produce it and make it into the bearings. They have to be machined afterwards, but that was a picture from 2013. Now, this is a failure. And the guy who we had as an aeronautical engineer was doing the design work in that time. Everything that was a bushing, he replaced it with AeroTough. Well, this is the bushing that's inside the landing gear that only holds the pin rigid. And he made a polymer bearing out of that and shouldn't have. And when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, what the hell are we doing? Mine was the only airplane, fortunately, we did that way. We checked the records, and everybody else that's put this kit in didn't get this. We just left that bushing, a steel bushing. But what happened is it overloaded it because it was cantilevered. Nothing moves here. This thing just holds a steel pin that you can pull back in so you can get the gear leg out. And it cracked the flange, which is not in itself a problem, but the bearing was actually deformed as a result of very high load, a cantilever load put on it. There's what it should look like. That's the steel bushing in there, and we wound up putting that back in. So this was done about 3 weeks ago during our annual. And in the annual, the shop manager, there's about 35 people in this shop. There's avionics people, AMT guys, and they said, we really want to look at everything you've done on this airplane so we can get a sense of the condition. I said, let's do it. Everything we took apart and looked at it and checked it. So that's what we did. We just put another steel bushing in to replace the, now they had a problem getting that steel bushing in. They had to shrink it in dry ice to get it in. Of course, it never should have come out in the first place. So, and the Aero Tough bushing in the fuselage was perfectly good condition, so we didn't change it. Now there's the drag link. There's the drag link Aero Tough bushing seen from the wing side, and you can see there's no clearance in it at all. That's after 1,000 hours of flying, and I don't know how many cycles, but I think I mentioned it up there initially. So that drag brace takes a huge load just on landing because the gear has a tendency to bend backwards, and that puts a load on the after and forward drag brace trunnions. I'm jumping all over the place here, but this is the latest thing we've done. It's anti-chafe tape for the cowlings, the upper cowlings. And we started out making these 4 inches wide. We make this tape as well. It's called Thor Tape in Thornton, which is the parent company, but we probably call it something else in Marsh Brothers. But we have basically put that on there to stop the fretting corrosion between the silicone rubber baffles and the cowling. And I know, is Norm going to be presenting here, Ken? Well, I mean, his story is crazy, but he actually, the baffles wore right through the cowling, the aluminum. Yeah. So you really have to stop this somehow. So this, the first time we put this on, we had a problem with the adhesive we used. We didn't use the right adhesive. And we got that figured out. And so now we're offering this in the kit. And I think I've got 3 kits to give, to offer for the auction that I brought down with me. That's what we started with, 4-inch wide one, and that's just wider than it needs to be. So we changed that to the 2-inch one. There you can see the the baffle material here, and the silicone rubber seals, and they're bearing against it, which is what you want. And that should stop. There should be no corrosion or wear on that Thor tape. There's the accumulator. Of course, everybody knows where their accumulator is, behind the baggage compartment. I actually had to replace mine because it got scratched. There were a few of them available, new old stock. I don't know. I think Jimmy's got one still. Yeah, he got the last one. So we made a piston for the accumulator out of Aerotough, and instead of O-rings with backup rings, we use our Thor seals, which are V-ring seals. There's a little more resistance as it moves inside the accumulator, but look at this piston. Now that's the stock piston. You can see the scratch marks on the aluminum. That's because there's been a certain amount of dirt in the system, and it's caused that piston to scratch. It also scratches the bore of the accumulator, which is aluminum. If you scratch the bore of the accumulator, it's very hard to get rid of those scratches. Even though there's a rider ring on the left side, it's not shown there, but there's a polymer riding ring there, it doesn't stop the scratching. As you can see, it's still on the piston. So we tried to hone it, and it's very difficult. You're right, Jimmy. It's very, very difficult to hone it, but once it gets scratched, it's going to stay scratched. Now, what happened here? I don't know what happened to this picture, but okay, so what should be here? I don't know, this picture disappeared, but to push that piston in and to compress the lips of the seal is difficult. So we made a thing like, we call it a shoehorn, just made of nylon, and we give it with the kit. It comes, you don't pay for it, it's just part of the kit. And then you just push the piston in, and it just guides it in, and it collapses those seals, and then once it's in, you take it away. That's what, I don't know why this didn't show up, but that's another thing we make. This is the gear leg bumper. When the gear comes up, it hits that. That's from an Aerostar, not mine, but another one on the ramp somewhere. And this dates back to maybe it is mine. Yeah, it probably is, 2013. and you can see the rubber's all beaten up. Well, that's what we make. It's a Thorflex bumper, and those marks on the surface, they're not depressions, they're just surface marks, so it's completely like new. This is a fairly recent kit we've made. It's a master cylinder rebuild kit. So we have a complete kit that will rebuild the brake master cylinder. We make the gland, we make a little V-ring, and we make all the parts that you need to rebuild your master cylinder. This is approved. We have an STC for this. And that's on my airplane. I just put one on. I didn't need it, but I put it on the airplane just to prove that. Now, you can feel a little bit difference in the pedal. There's a slight stick slip because of the V-rings. They do that when they're contacting the shaft, the same in the wing landing gear, floating piston, and the lower seal. These are the brake anchor bushes. Now, the original ones are made of steel. Cleveland had a problem with the pins in the slave cylinder block sticking, so they relieved half the length of the bushings by about 10 thousandths, so there's only half the length of the steel bushing is actually working. And then they have the flange on the inside, so what we found initially is these were, on a couple of airplanes, these were moving out of their bore and moving in toward the center of the aircraft. So we changed them and turned them around, put the flange on the other side where it goes in against a flange in the bore, and that stopped that. And so these, they need to be reamed after you put them on the airplane, but then you you don't lubricate them. They're meant to be dry. And there's less tendency for brake dust to get in there and hang up the brake slave cylinder package from moving. Now that's what we use for bolts that are exposed. This is Nick Josen, our chief engineer's favorite material. He used this when he was a designer of landing gear at Boeing. And it's called Core Band 50. Now, I've had someone say this is no different than LPS3. Maybe it is, I don't know. But that's what we recommend for preventing corrosion on the pins or whatever is going to be not protected by grease. We should have the STC. We're supposed to have it at the end of August. Now I hope we have it in September. But the approval for this one is basically it's the shaft the cross shaft for the turbines, for the turbo wastegate controller. And what we do is the shaft doesn't go through the block in a square way. Some of them do. I think in Jimmy's it went right through without any problem, but on mine I had to. They were at quite an angle. So we built. But what Jimmy was lucky, but there's no wear on this at all after, I don't know, since we put them on. I don't know how many cycles that is, but we have it. I think these should last the life of the airplane. If there's play in here, and there is in the spherical bearings, then they start to shake, and they pound themselves out in sometimes even 100 hours. It's difficult to lubricate them, and the lubricant doesn't stay there. And so I did this on my very first Aerostar, and I used a material called Bestbell made by DuPont. It was extremely expensive, but it was a high temperature polymer. And I took the idea to Jim Christie. I said, Jim, I think we got a solution for this cross shaft. He said, no, I got a better idea, Sandy. We're going to do it a different way. Well, his different way was to make the cross shaft bigger in diameter and make the ends replaceable. So if it wore the ends, you could replace the ends. That was a good idea. But he still stayed with the spherical bushings, made them out of Inconel, but he still pounded out of shape. This, I think, is the solution. And you have to, in the kit, we will supply a cutter that will cut the hole with a pilot that you screw into the end of the cross shaft, and then you turn it with a wrench, and it cuts its own hole. So it's like a little cutting tool. Takes a while, but. Now that's a rod end that is greaseable. Now this is not approved, and we don't sell it, and we don't make it, but I got it on my airplane, and that seems to stop the damage at the turbo link, wastegate link, and where it attaches to the cross shaft. And I'm using a high temperature grease on that. I can give you the name of it. If you want to put these rod ends on, again, they don't have the telltale hole through them, so they're not approved, and we're not going to sell them, but that does work, and it seems to be a solution. Now, Ken's come up with another idea of using a spring to decrease the free loss motion in the linkage, and that's possibly another way to help save these rod ends. Here is the attachment for the drag link onto the main landing gear casting at the bottom, and you can see the flange is cracked. So that's the sign of extreme pressure on that. The bearing is not overloaded, but when you have nothing to support the outside here, there's no OD that context, it's going to tend to split the bearing. And we know this from our other stuff. We make rudder bearings for ships that are 4 feet in diameter. We don't make the flange as part of the bearing for this very reason. So we just replaced the flange bushings with straight bushings and independent thrust washers. That's what we supply now for that kit. There's the Aerotough nose gear jury brace. Now, they really were very concerned about checking for clearance in the nose gear when we did the annual, and they were up in there checking everything, and everything's cool. There's our flap rollers. In 2022, we replaced the steel bushings with a special hard stainless steel, and the highest loaded one, actually, we had to extend the bushing or the roller right onto the full width of the attached brackets to the flap, so we could get the pressure down so that we didn't have a problem there. But the washers are Aerotough. There's no grease needed. All you do is spray the flap track with Corban 50. Fortunately, Aerostar made the flap tracks in steel. Beechcraft in their King Air made them on aluminum, and once you get some scratching or damage to the aluminum, it's a huge job to change the flap tracks out. You got an enormous amount of maintenance there. So that's that. There's the King Air flap roller, just to show you what it looks like. That should be certified very soon. We've been on that for a year and a half, and we have tested this flap roller to twice the cycles that is allowable for the King Air roller flap roller that has needle roller bearings. And we can offer the King Air twice the life, King Air operator. And the cost of a kit for a total upgrade on the King Air is something like $7,000. There's so many of these King Airs out there, they're commercial. That might take us into profitability, because up to now, Marsh Brothers hadn't made $1 of profit. I shouldn't admit that, but that's the truth. Anyway, there's a fuel cap washer. This was not my idea. There was a guy, an Aerostar owner called Bo Dugan. Anybody remember him? Yeah, Bo said to me one day, he said, you know, Sandy, why don't you make these washers underneath the fuel cap tab out of Aerotough? And I said, hey, that's a great idea. I'll try it out. Well, we got, I don't know how many hundreds of these out now, but we supply them to everybody that has shock caps and other caps. So they've been very good item. That's another bumper used for the clamshell door link. When the clamshell door opens, this link here on the right side comes down and contacts that, and that's one on mine. There's, anybody recognize that airplane? Is theirs? It's not mine. It's beautiful, beautiful work. Just shows the drag link attached trunnion bearing in the frame, and of course the steel bushing. Jim Hudson said, if I got that Aerotough stuff in my drag link, and I said, no, you're going to see it in the picture. Here it is. That's Jim Hudson's airplane. That shows you the total package in a typical landing gear. We got the bottom bushing here. We have we still retain the O-ring and the backup rings for the static seal on the outside, but inside we use an Aerotough, or a Thor seal, we call it. I don't know what the Marsh Brothers name for it is. The floating piston we didn't put initially in. The top cap here is also Aerotough. That just is just the same as the original bronze one. But we saved 12 pounds on an aircraft by changing out all these bushings. It's not a huge deal to an Aerostar owner, but it's a big deal for somebody that's like a King Air operator. The reason we put the floating piston in is because Ken told me, look, I think you should do it because sometimes they stick. Well, our gear does not stop the wing from dropping. It tends to reduce the tendency for the wing to drop, but it doesn't absolutely stop it. And we turned down an order for 6 sets from, this is all STC approved, incidentally, from our firefighter friends in Eastern Canada, because he said, will it stop the wing drop? Because our pilots don't like the wing dropping when they turn off the the runway. I said, well, no, it will not stop it, but it'll reduce it. And that's how it is. So we have several of these. I don't know how many of these kits we have out there, but we're going to do a survey and find out how many hours we got on them by the various owners. This was our Achilles heel. We could not find a bearing for the lower torque links that would stand up. We went through about 4 different materials. We tried competitors' materials. We tried everything we had. Nothing would take the pressure of that lower torque link. Now you could say, well, what's the difference between the lower and the upper? Jim Crispy said they're the same. Well, they're not the same because the upper one has a longer bushing. So the load is distributed over a greater length. So the problem was at the bottom. Eventually we put what we call an XL TRAXL bearing in there. And that's what you see there. It's made of bronze, but it has a Thornton XL lining in it. Solved the problem. Greaseless also. So I can remember selling, I said to Joel, we're playing around with torque link bearings, you know. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'll bring you a set and put them, you can put them on your airplane and try them. Well, I brought them down. I remember flying down to Harrisburg and giving them to Joel. He put them on his airplane, and of course they failed. Well, okay, we weren't shocked about that. We thought they might not, but I have one slide that says Joel Stout. It shows a failed bearing. Anyway, that looks like the answer for the extreme pressure. They're hard to make and they're expensive, but they work. And we actually inject the polymer into the inside of the bronze and then cure it. There it is in 2020, and there it is in 2022. No grease ever. And the coating on the bolt is this Corban. Now this is what we did at the apex on this annual, because I was noticing that there was damage to the washers between the torque links on the main landing gear torque links because there's no grease. So we made an Aerotough washer to go between so there won't be any metal-to-metal contact. So that one hasn't been, we haven't even announced that one yet. They're the first people to see it, but there you see the upper bushing as it goes through the main landing gear housing assembly with the bolt out. This is a problem, and I know that Joel's got the same problem on one of his airplanes because I saw the cowlings over there. The stainless steel screen had become damaged, and right along the bottom. And what was happening was the stainless steel was coming back and hitting the fins on the intercooler and starting to chafe them. Did you find that, Joel, on that airplane? Yeah, so rather than buy the screens from Aerostar aircraft, they want about $1,000 a screen. Now, I don't know how much it is, but it was a lot of money. We sourced a stainless steel screen from someplace else. So if anybody wants to know where we got it from, I'll be happy to tell you. But that was put in and should solve that. There's the damaged screen, in case anybody else has something like that. Something we sell or fix, but just thought I'd just mention it when we, and those are some of the knobs we make. See what's wrong with that picture? There's no knob there. Well, this is the alternate air doors, which we never use. They're stiff, and every other annual I've been there, and I said, well, just pretend that they work, because they don't work. Well, some young mechanic got in there, and he just pulled on that damn knob until he broke the cable. Now, I have ordered a new cable, but putting that cable in is not going to be a simple task. Has anybody done it? How easy was it, Joel? Okay, there's a nose gear assembly when we were going in. Well, as you can see, we put this stupid bushing in the housing up here. Now, the loading on the nose gear is not anything like it is on the main landing gear, so we didn't change that out, but that was just as dumb as doing it on the main landing gear. But you can see here on the lower torque link, on the lower steering column, we got a flange bushing here to replace the bronze one, but we kept the bronze washer underneath it. Well, the bronze washer has no lubrication because there's no grease used there, so it wasn't getting lubricated. It wasn't a problem, but we decided we had to fix that, so we did. We made it out of Aerotuff. There's the floating piston. I did a story on this in the last Aerostar magazine, which you can read, and it made a huge difference in the cushioning of the nose gear when it touches down. And here you can see the lower flange disc there has now been we bonded in the flange bearing here, bonded it to the casting, and we added this bushing. Now we bonded it to the lower cap, but we didn't need to. It could have been free floating because it's seeing steel on both sides. And there you can see the pin, the pin you can pull out for separating the torque links. My biggest worry about this was, what if somebody forgets to put the pin in? Well, what happens, I've discovered it. I was doing an instrument ride, and I'm in there, and the inspector's on the right side, and I go to taxi, and I can't, oh my God, the airplane, I can't, there's no nose gear steering. The airplane wants to turn sideways. I said, sorry, but I know what it is. I had to shut down. I said, I did the pre-flight in the hangar, and then I pulled it out, but I forgot to put the pin in. So if you don't put the pin in, you're not going to go anywhere. Because the nose wheel is going to cast her over, and that's the end of that. That you can see our nose. That was when he had a seal leaking, an O-ring seal leaking between the forging and the piston here, and there's a little O-ring down in there with a plate on it and a bolt, and you have to change that out, and that's what we were doing in that picture. But it just shows you the gear, and so everything's cool there. Those are our seat rollers that we changed out we bore out the existing roller, put in an Aerotuff bushing, and used a sleeve on the bolt. And they're good. There you see the bushing and the sleeve and the bolt. So there's the lower torque. That's kind of the thing that we were having with the lower torque link. It was just so high a pressure, it was just knocking these bushings out of shape. That's what the bolt looked like when we pulled it out. No corrosion on it. And that's the shop that does the work for us. Now, these guys have about 30 mechanics, and they do a good job. At least I'm always there for the annual. I'm there. I take a whole week off work, and I work on it with them. And they got an avionics shop there and so on. So anybody looking in Canada wants to find a place to do some work, that's the shop I'd recommend. That's it. Any questions?
You talked about your nose gear pin. I know it's certified with the plastic bushing, right?
Sorry?
Your nose gear.
Yeah, no, we do not have the approval on the nose gear pin yet. It's a PDA or RDA or something. It's not an STC, but it's coming. It's coming like everything is taking so long now with Transport Canada and the FAA. We have 2 aeronautical engineers working full-time just on approvals in Marsh Brothers. And it's since COVID, getting anything through there has been a tremendous problem. I do. I have samples of a lot of the stuff here. I got nothing to give you, but there's a bunch of stuff for auction. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Ken.
Thanks, Sandy.
Good job. Thanks.
Joel, you want to come introduce our guest?